February Area Plan Commission meeting to order. Could I have roll call, please?
Brian Baker. Tammy Bolin. Present. James Chrisman.
Here.
Mark Klinkenbeard.
Present.
John Collette.
Here.
Jim Crawley. Jeff Ford. Norm Froderman.
Here.
Don Folk.
Here.
John Hanley.
Here.
Marcus Mauer.
Here.
Debbie May. William Verdine. Fred Wilson.
We do have a quorum. Could I ask everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I assume everyone's had an opportunity to review last month's meeting minutes and status report. Are there any corrections?
Motion to approve.
Those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Executive Director's report.
Good evening. Two things real quick. Just one, as I'm sure you can see in my director's report, our annual reports are underway. A lot of tabulations are done. I don't have an ETA on that just yet, but they are underway. And secondly, I wanted to just mention that City of Terre Haute has hired a city planner. We're excited about that, and I believe Mr. Maurer is as well. I think that's going to bring many, many great things to come in the near future, and hopefully we'll be able to introduce her to this board at some point in time.
Sydney, anything you got for us? Nope. Any questions from the Plan Commission? Entertain a motion.
Motion to accept.
Second. Those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. We've got the Plan Committee report in here, probably nothing we need to do on that. No communications received other than what we have here.
Correct.
Okay. We'll move on. First item under city rezonings, docket number 7, amended special ordinance number 45, 2022, part of 920 North 25th Street, 2425 and 2431 First Avenue, 2428 and 2442 Locust Street, all in Terre Haute, from an R1 PD and R1 and C2 to a C6 strip business district.
You do have one letter from a neighbor in front of you in favor. The owner is Data Point Inc. Proposed use is a landscaping business, Rose Hill Lawn Care, represented by Mr. Shagley. Proposed zoning is C6 Strip Business District. Current zoning is R1 Planned Development, R1 Single Family Residence, and C2 Community Commerce District. The property is located on North 25th Street, Locust Street, and First Avenue. It has R1 and R1 planned development to the north, M2 and C6 to the east, and R1 to the south and west. The petition was originally heard last month, but the site plan depended on an alley being vacated by City Council. The alley vacation was defeated, so the petitioner was required to resubmit with a new site plan. Per City Code, C6 zoning is to be located along major streets or expressways. 25th Street is considered a major street in the City of Terre Haute. Landscape, nurseries, garden supplies, and seed stores are a listed use by right in the C6 category. Lots located at 2425 First Avenue, 2431 First Avenue, and a portion of 920 North 25th Street were rezoned in 2019 to R1 Planned Development for a landscaping business with variances for buffering and screening to the surrounding residential. Since that did not materialize, within 6 months the lots reverted to R1. A portion of 920 North 25th Street and 2448 Locust Street were rezoned to C6 within the same petition. The original site plan showed the alley used as an entrance. As the alley was not vacated, the site plan has been amended. The site plan shows lots 214 through 221 will be used for the landscaping business and will be fenced. The entrance will be through 25th Street at the existing business. The petitioner is still requesting for lots 260 through the west half of 264 to be rezoned to C6, but states that portion will remain vacant at this time. Rezoning lots 260 through the west half of 264 could be considered spec zoning since there are no plans at this time, and there are a number of possibilities for uses in the C6 zoning. If in the future the landowners have a potential commercial use for this location, then a site plan must be approved prior to development. The city may request the property be combined to a single lot of use. Any livable dwellings will need to be removed, parking will need to be hard surfaced and illuminated, a screening to the adjacent residential, a stormwater drainage plan will need to be approved. Staff offers a favorable recommendation with following conditions: must be approved in 90 days, and approved detailed site plan to include customer parking and stormwater drainage approved by city engineering.
Mr. Shagley.
Mr. Acting President, fellow members of the commission, my name is Richard Shagley. I'm with the law firm of Wright, Shagley & Lowry, and tonight I'm here on behalf of Data Point Incorporated. As Cindy made reference to, I was here recently on this same project. There was a accompanying ordinance with this to vacate an alley, and when it was heard by the city council in January, the alley was turned down, and we tabled the rezoning. Well, unfortunately, because of the change, the substantial change, we had to come back and file this amended rezoning. The only difference between this and what I was here before is the alley that we're vacating is not being rezoned. Since the filing of this, I have filed another alley vacate. Part of the process, this went through several city council meetings, and through the process, we had some people had some suggestions on improvements in this project. We finally came to, I believe, an agreement. So we filed a new alley vacate, and basically we're not cutting down as quickly to get to Locust. We're giving the neighbor about 15 feet of green space between their property line and the alley, probably a little bit more because of an existing telephone pole. But so there's a new alley vacate that'll be heard on February 9th at the city council meeting. We don't anticipate coming back for rezoning of that because it's our belief and understanding that the property owners who will be gaining the alley, Data Point owns both sides. So they will be acquiring that, and it'll be kind of sucked into whatever that current zoning is. And under this plan, it would all be a C6. So they'll be able to go forward with their, I'll say, original plan once these processes are moved on. If you have any, I'm sorry, I know that's a little confusing. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from anyone on the planning commission? Is there anyone here speaking in opposition to this proposal? Go ahead and come up and give us your name and.
My name is Tracy Pruitt. I live at 2301 Second Avenue, have for the last 35 years. I also own rental property around that area. It's a residential area. It's been a residential area. Andy Stadler started buying that property along First Avenue and pushing it over. And we knew that one day, we, the people of the neighborhood, knew that it would one day be developed for some reason. Somebody wanted to do something with it. And we've gone back and forth for several months about this. Everybody in the neighborhood talked about it. Nobody, this meeting here was a sprung on everybody in the neighborhood about coming to this, and they might show up for tomorrow at the meeting at city council, and they may not. I have letters from people that I read at the last meeting, and I've talked to the neighbors again. There's a lady who she's lived across the street for 16 years. Her name is Linda Bryan. She would like me to read a note from her. I've lived at 2406 First Avenue for over 15 years. I live in a home in a neighborhood, not a commercial area. I do not want a lawn care service across the street from me, and I don't want the city to give away a paved alley and replace it with rock. Her name is Linda Bryan. And the people who live on the corner there, I own a home on First Avenue, and I have been informed that the large open property across the street is to have a fence built around it in its entirety. I'm quite sure that once a fence is built, it will immediately be spray painted and defaced. This will cause all surrounding properties to fall in value. I can only see this as being a giant eyesore. I ask that they consider not allowing this to happen at this time. Thank you, Roger and Tori Kelly. They work in the evenings both of them work at Union Hospital, so they aren't able to go either. Tony Smodella, he owns rental property around on the avenues as well. Spoke to him. He couldn't make it to the last thing, and he couldn't make it today when I spoke to him about coming this evening. He's going to try to make it to the city council tomorrow. It is a neighborhood. Nobody wants to stand on their front porch. None of you want to stand on your front porch and look at a large green metal fence in front of your house. And I don't live right there looking at it, but I cut down First Avenue all the time. I live on Second Avenue, so I cut down that road all the time. Anybody who's been around that neighborhood knows that all large metal fences, garages, or anything of that nature will be spray painted eventually. It's just a fact of life in that area. Not a good canvas to look at. Nobody wants to see graffiti of any kind, most especially the profanities that are spray painted on it right in front of your front door. Not good. I spoke with the city engineer. Very, very nice that he would spend time talking to me for an hour, explaining to me different situations. With this particular zoning that's asked for, it is required, as I understand it, it is required that a fence be built to block the view of any of the equipment or anything being stored on the property. So it's inevitable that there's going to be a fence that you're not going to see through and people are going to spray paint it. But he has been very good about making concessions that he would be willing to put up greenery or something, and he wants to maintain the look of his property for the betterment of the community, but also for the betterment of his business. And I appreciate that. I would ask that it be considered by the owner to put the garden that he's promoting over on Locust, flip that over so that the people on First Avenue that's in a residential area get the benefit of a garden area, a nice place, and put his fence along Locust Street where nobody has to look at it. Across the street are those great big green transformer green fences on the corner that have been spray painted, and they paint it over, and then they spray paint it, and they paint it over. Why not put their big green fence along Locust? I know that corridor looks nice, if it's nice and green and it has nice foliage or a garden, but I would ask them to do that. And they have made concessions on the fence, which Ms. Cottom and her family have agreed to that they've been understanding enough to slide that over 16 feet, the width of the alley, to slide it over and then miss that phone pole. So that's good. They are working to help work with the neighborhood and the understanding of what's going on. And the owner and I walked it just last week, walked all of his property and measured things off and looked at it. And he is concerned about doing a good job for the neighborhood, but also he wants his business to be successful. So we understand, but the people in the neighborhood don't want a fence along there. And we would ask that if you agree to it, or you give your okey dokey to it before it goes to city council, think about maybe approving that on Locust, but not approving the side on First Avenue. And I know it's all one petition, so I don't think you can really do anything about that. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, the original plan, when we came before you, whenever that was to put a fence, a solid fence, which basically bordered the sidewalk, bordered the house to the west, which is I believe it's a HUD home, and then on the alley until the alley portion is vacated. Because of the concerns from the neighbors, it was agreed upon that the fence, there would be a 5-foot gap between the fence and the neighbor to the west, enough to get a mower in. And then there'd be a 4 or 5 foot setback buffer area on First Avenue to allow for planting some trees. So although you will have a fence, you will also have planted trees. The idea of moving what he's intending to do on the north side of the alley to on Locust, there's not enough room. Kind of the beauty of the way it's set up now is there is some asphalt that is on 25th Street. To remove that, he's like every other business owner, he does have to worry about his expenses. The fact that I've been to 5 meetings, 6 meetings, tells you something. In my opinion, as you know, I'm here in front of you a lot. In my opinion, he has been very good to working with the neighbors. And up until Mr. Pruitt stood up here, I thought we had made all the neighbors happy. I was kind of surprised to hear what he had to say this evening. He brought up the Cottoms. The Cottoms are on Locust Street. You can see their property from 25th Street. Currently, they're extended beyond their property and is using Data Point's property for their personal use. Data Point has agreed to give them even more property and a gap just to try to be a good neighbor. But apparently that's not acceptable at this point either. The reality is here, although I believe Sydney said in the staff report, this was rezoned for planned development, and Data Point moved in immediately and started using it for the intended purpose. And it's our belief that whatever happens tonight, whether it happens tomorrow night, they could start doing what they want to do right now without all the concessions that they have agreed to. But the owner of Data Point is a good neighbor and wants to do the right thing, and that's why he has agreed to the concessions that he has. That's why we're here tonight asking for this property to be rezoned. That's why we're going back to City Council tomorrow night to ask for it to be rezoned, and then back on February 9th for the alley vacate. Data Point is simply wanting to invest in our community, and obviously he wants his business to grow, and he feels that this is a good location. He's in the lawn care business, and I apologize, I'm sure I probably said this a couple months ago when I was here, but he benefits by creating an environment when you drive by, you think, I want to stop and have him come to my house or my business. So I think it'd be strange for anybody to sit there and think, well, he's not going to take care of this. If someone tags his fence, he's just going to leave it there. I mean, he's got, this is his front door, and he wants to make sure it's a good presentation and has good street views and whatnot. So I think, again, I'm here tonight on behalf of Data Point. We're asking this property to be rezoned. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Richard again? Anyone else like to speak to this issue?
Yeah, I hear the graffiti is, but I'm sure if that was, then I heard, there was green, because I think a live is, okay, I think evergreen, if that could be placed in that 5-foot roll,
Yeah.
and they, they're not take care of it.
Right.
I can't see the graffiti in that area.
Because of this pending matter, I always make it a point to drive by and look at what I'm working on. And I've driven this area a dozen times. There is graffiti in that area, but there's also a pretty good effort to cover it up. If we didn't allow business to expand because of something that might happen, our community would be in trouble. I feel confident, as I stated earlier, he has a incentive to have a good street, some curb appeal. That's his business, and I feel confident that he'll make sure that that's taken care of. So.
Anything else? I'll entertain a motion.
Motion for approval.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Next item under city rezonings, docket number 9, special ordinance number 1, 2023, 430 South 7th Street, from an R2 to a C3 regional commerce district.
And the property owners are YXION Incorporated. Proposed use is a commercial building with a second-story apartment. Proposed zoning is C3 Regional Commerce District. Current zoning is R2 Family Residence District, represented by Mr. Shagley. To the north, it has R2, C1, and R3 to the west, R2 to the south, and C2 to the east. You do also have a handout there. It's a recommendation from one of the staff engineers with city engineering. The petitioners are requesting to rezone the property to C3 to match the commercial use of the property. They have not stated that what type of commercial use is intended, so it is unclear if it falls within the C3 category. There is an apartment on the second story. Section 10-207G1A states, dwelling units, lodging rooms, motels, and mobile home parks are not permitted in the C3 zone, except as they may be permitted by Planning Commission with the approval of the Common Council, may vary the requirements of this division in order to comply with the spirit and meaning as done in Division 1, Section 10-20, Title, Intent, and Purpose. In all cases, the regional shopping center shall be submitted to the Planning Commission as a planned development. Therefore, it would be required for the property to be rezoned to C3 planned development. The site plan does not show if the apartment meets minimum dwelling size requirements. There is no parking, and the structure does not meet setbacks. Those could also be addressed as variances in a planned development. Otherwise, variances through the BZA will be necessary. City engineering has agreed that a planned development may be the appropriate zoning. There are 2 entrances at the front of the building as well as an entrance to the apartment on Oak Street. There's only one 911 address associated with the property. If there's a second business, there will need to be a second address as well as an address from Oak for the dwelling. Staff recommends for the petition to be tabled to amend the rezoning to C3 planned development or another zoning deemed appropriate by city engineering.
Mr. Shagley.
Good evening, Acting President of the Commission, fellow members of the board. My name is Richard Shagley. I'm with the law firm of Wright, Shagley, and Lowry. And tonight I'm here on behalf of the petitioner, YXION Incorporated. They own the property at 430 South 7th Street that's currently zoned R2. And they're asking this to be rezoned or C3. I don't know if you're familiar with this piece of property, and I've lived in Terre Haute several years. I've probably thousands of times I've driven by this property, but in the last month I've started to look at it, and it is crazy. It appears that there was a house there, and they built a commercial structure around it. It's mind-boggling. I've met with Marcus, and I appreciate, Marcus, in your time on this matter. He was not able to find any permits that were ever pulled. They just did it. And really, up until recently, they haven't had any trouble. It was R2. It was recently a board game place in the apartment up top. Caleb, who is in the engineer's office, who wrote the letter, used to go there. And unfortunately, in today's times, the owner has 2 things going against it, in my opinion. One, as you know, I've been here in front of you probably 4 or 5 times in the last 2 years doing a rezoning. That was kind of a no-brainer rezoning. But the problem is the property, although it was always used for a certain use, didn't meet the zoning classification. And the banks have tightened it up, and they won't lend money. Some banks won't lend money if they don't match. The sellers, and with their realtor, have had a difficulty selling this property because it's not zoned commercial. And the other problem you have is a lot of buyers don't want to buy it and then wait 3 or 4 months to go through a rezoning process. That can be timely. It can be trouble if neighbors show up. It can just be a unnecessary burden, so they move on to the next property. As a result, the petitioners are asking this property to be rezoned to C3. Now, then, which brings up another level of issues, as Sydney made reference to. If you look at our zoning code, there's really, C1 doesn't work because you can't have residential. C2 doesn't work because you can't have residential. C3 works, but it has to be approved by the council. There's a little clause in there about a planned development. That talks about a strip mall, so you can make an argument that this isn't going to be a strip mall, so you don't need to do the planned development. And the problem with the planned development is, in my opinion, so I come back in front of you next month asking this to be a planned development. Well, the problem with the planned development is I can't say that it's going to be a hair salon. I could only say it's a commercial use. And I don't anticipate that being well accepted. And it also, because it's a planned development, the beauty about the planned development is if I come here and say I want to use this house for a daycare or a hair salon, well, if I stop using it for a hair salon, it reverts back to the residential. And the next person that comes in to use that for a business, they've got to go through the hoops to do the business. This isn't a house, this is a business. I would say if we all drove by there, we'd say that's a commercial business. This is a commercial use. And doing the planned development, I think it creates a burden. If someone came to me and said, hey, I'm about to buy this building, do you see any problems with this? It's zoned C3 planned development. They've been using it for a bookstore, but I want to use it for a hair salon. I said, well, you may have some trouble because if a neighbor complains, they could say it's not the intended use of it, and you're going to have to go through a rezoning. So that could either stop the sale or create a problem for the potential buyer. The safe play, in my opinion, would be to rezone the C3. And then we filed a variance today for the off-street parking and the setbacks. The other beautiful part about this property is it uses every inch of their property. There's no buffer between the sidewalk and the building. There's no buffer the alley. I mean, when they built this, they used every inch of their property. As a result, they don't meet the setback requirements of the C3, and they don't meet the off-street parking. So that's why we filed the variance today. I apologize, this one's even more confusing than the past. I promise you the next one I bring you is going to be a great, easy one. You'll probably applaud when I get done, or at least think about it. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from anyone on the plan? Go ahead.
One quick addition. Part of the reason we recommend a plan development is you can put in the language, any uses as permitted under the C3 zoning classification. So if they wanted to do C3, then they could do any of those that they wanted to as a part of the plan development, and then include the residence on top. Or C2 with the residence on top. They can put in any of those that they choose. So we don't feel that it's restrictive in any way. When you can write into the ordinance any of the permitted uses as permitted by right in the C3 classification.
That being said, do you have a particular reason for letting them come back with a C1, C2, why the C3? What does that create in this circumstance that those don't?
The residency on the second floor.
Yeah.
But
Because-
we would have to prove that in any of the three, is that correct?
No, you
No.
can't do it in a C1 or 2. C3 is the only one that allows it, or a
Yeah.
C8, but we're outside the C8 boundaries.
So, again, if they wanted to go that route, they could write into the petition any of the commercial uses as permitted by right in a C1, C2, C3, as well as
For the plan development.
for the plan development.
That would work with the current, but would that affect the second buyer?
No, so long as the use is permitted by right and how it's written.
So if the building's currently empty, would that have any impact on it? I mean,
Because the ordinance would allow for any of the uses allowed in any of the commercial districts as prescribed by the petitioner. So if they felt the C8 was best for it, if they felt the C2 was best for it, whatever the case may be, they could write that in. It's all commercial district. We could pick and choose if we felt that comfortable with that or not.
But when we do a R1 plan development, and we say we're gonna turn it into a X, when it's no longer used for X, you don't get to use whatever else is approved in that. You have to go back, it reverts back to the R1.
Correct.
We're here tonight asking this be rezoned to C3 to prevent any confusion for the potential buyer and to allow for the use of the rental property on the second story.
Anything else from the planning commission?
Well, I'm a little confused. You're saying if they put the language in that you're talking about, and it ceased to becoming used for what they're using it for, if they use it for something else, they have to come back in and rezone them, or,
Not if it's a listed use by right as a part of the ordinance.
okay. So if they say that language that you said, then that would
It
work.
could be anything under that zoning classification.
And what about if they sell the property and then,
The zoning stays with the property. We don't do it by use or by right. You do it by right, and it runs with the property.
okay.
No.
I'm still a little bit confused as well. If we're suggesting that he wait and come back for C3 plan development, and in the language it allows anything in C3, why are you suggesting that C3's just blanket C3 with us approving by ordinance that we can, a residence on top is not easier? Or what problems am I creating by suggesting that? The C3, it sounds like you're wanting them to come back and basically write the same thing to me, and I'm sure I'm missing something, but
Or plan development that says you can use C3,
you
why
can
not
use
have
anything,
C3?
why not
and
have C3?
Yeah.
And I'm lost too. Maybe council can help.
Real quick, I think that goes towards just the city code in general. I think there needs to be a revamping. When that was written, a lot of things have changed. But that's another, Mr. Kelly.
If I may.
Go ahead, sure.
Eddie Felling, City Attorney. I certainly understand what Mr. Baylor's asking. From our perspective, and Mr. Shagley reached out to my office asking how we would like to see it filed. We had asked that he file it as a C3, not as a planned development. He asked which way to do that. The reason being is that once it goes to the council, I think they know exactly what they're dealing with. And again, Mr. Shagley alluded to it. Planned developments get odd when we get 20 or 30 years down the road and we're looking at a piece of property that's a planned development. You have to go pull the initial document that rezoned it to look and see what you can use that area for, versus if it's a C3, I can look at Beacon and I know exactly, engineering will know exactly what they can use that piece of property for. So again, I don't mean to sound like I'm disagreeing with your staff, but from the city's perspective, I think the council would prefer to see it this way as opposed to a planned development.
Thank you.
And I'll jump in. I've talked to Richard and I've talked to area planning and talked to our staff, and it's, there is kind of a gap in our zoning code, as Eddie said. We don't have a good mixed-use zoning class. And it makes it difficult to do this for some properties, and this is one of them. So this is a zoning class that does allow for residential and commercial. I think that's the reason we're suggesting that.
Is there anyone here speaking in opposition to this request? Anything else? Any other questions for anyone on the planning commission? Got a motion for favor?
I'll second.
Second, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
The next item under subdivisions, major, primary, secondary docket, number 6, file number 4, 2023, Dillion Acres.
The red light is on.
Uh-oh.
The property is frontage along South Carlisle Street, Sutton Drive, 50.21 acres. Surveyor's report. The applicant is requesting to plat lots 1 and 2 acres of the states of creating 3 lots for residential development. Upfront has approved
Is the petitioner present? Matt, you got anything to add? Any questions from the planning commission? Anyone here speaking in opposition to this? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item under county rezonings, docket number 5, file number 1, 2023, 6021 East Devonald Avenue, Terre Haute, from an RS to an R2 two-family residential suburban.
Robert Miller, in this case, is Martin Story, represented by Donna Phillips. The current zoning is RS single-family residential suburban, use currently R. Currently is RS single-family residential suburban, proposed zoning is R2 two-family residential dwelling, proposed use is 2 single-family dwelling. The property is located on the south side of Devonald Avenue, 308 west of the intersection of Devonald Avenue, Scott, property associated with 60. Guidance recommends state residential in this area. Development priority is low, and sanitary sewer is available. Surrounding uses are agricultural to the north, residential suburban, to the west, east, agricultural, to the south. The petitioner is requesting to allow for a second residence property that the mother lives in, and sometime in the past, cash garages were sold. There are no current permits on file for conversion, no inspections have been completed. Consequently, it is unknown if conversion was done to get residential code. Requirements for common sanitary system are complete. The assessor's office has no record of conversion. The health department has septic permits on file. The comprehensive plan describes this area as a state residential. Applies within that recommendation of residential land use, approximately 1 acres. The expectation is density should be encouraged to moderate public utilities available. There could be made that virtue is a medium use. The property does exceed the minimum lot size required for a new R2 two-family residential lot. The closest R2 zoning is 2.1 miles to the west-southwest, consequently this could be included as spot zoning. And Indiana spot zoning is not legal per se. Zoning action bears compassionate relation to the public health safety goals of being well built. The distinction is that spot zoning is not pursuant to power when it fails further the public. Further, staff is of the opinion that this petition is not for the judgment there. Public water is believed to be available. Based upon the above findings, staff can offer favorable recommendations. Zoning belongs to fall at the garage, at ground, habitable structure, and construction. And in keeping with the residential code. Building permits will be issued for livable building and health purposes, city public septic facility design.
Is the petitioner present? Anything you'd like to add? Any questions from the planning commission? Anyone here speaking in opposition to this? Sure.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Branson, and I live at 6055 East Devonald, so the house immediately to the east. And we've lived there for about 25 years, for a long time. In the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen a lot of changes next door to us. Not only was the garage converted, which we don't really have an opposition to, as long as it's done correctly and safely, because that directly affects our property and our property values. Plus, we do pay our taxes, and we want everybody around us to pay theirs too. I am a civil servant, so I know that pays part of my salary. As long as it's done safely and to code and health for septic and all of that, we're not necessarily in opposition for it. Over the past 2 or 3 years, we've had to deal also with an Airbnb that they've operated out of that location. At times, whoever has resided in the garage has gone up to the main house so that the Airbnb renters could be in there. They've also rented a tent or a teepee in the backyard, and people have used the restroom. It was advertised that there were no restroom facilities on the grounds. they would either have to go in a bucket or kind of like a deer blind they had set up with a bucket in there as a toilet. Also, when people are there for the Airbnb, they're allowed to use the pool that they have on the property. And I've had to go over and talk to them because there's been young children in the pool who have not been supervised. And working on the fatality team at DCS, I've seen enough dead children that I want them to be supervised at all times and it be safe. So as long as the property is safe, well-maintained, and up to code, we don't have an opposition to it, but we want to make sure that the proper permits are done and that people see that it's a safe property.
Thank you. Any questions from the planning commission? Anyone else like to speak to this issue? I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approval with conditions.
I propose to get it back for the motion. Being an old building inspector myself, first thing I see that's improved, as Bob alluded to. And right there, the child safety, whatever the age, that requires 5-foot fence and not the sidewall of the school itself. So that is one of the first things I would have addressed if I was an inspector and go out there and see that. And many things, of course, when you convert a garage into a habitable homes, or they have it owned by their own place. But I see certain things in there too, and when you do, this, apparently the, square footage for the home now is higher than it used to be, so, which is, well, it used to be 24 by 24, and I believe that exceeds it, that, of things that the ingress, egress, or the sliding door, or the doors and things like this, the, structure of it itself, would be a garage probably built with, studs on 24-inch centers, and your rafters was less than a home itself, so just those things there, hopefully a building inspector has and would go down there, and check that, make sure it was a habitable home there for that garage. That mine's basically not on anything scientist, but just the fact of the building code and the swimming area there. Thank you for the delay.
All right.
I think Norm's recommendation is based on the conditions that are attached to it,
Yes.
which involves the IRC codes and building
All the
permits and
conditions, yeah.
health departments, just for
Do you
clarification.
agree to those conditions? Ma'am, do you agree to these conditions?
She'll have to. If we rezone her, she doesn't have any choice. So we have a motion on the floor for a favorable recommendation with the conditions. Got a second? Those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item under City General Ordinance, docket number 8, General Ordinance number 2, 2023, Chapter 10 of the Terrell City Code related to special use criteria and the definitions of family and persons requiring additional consideration.
General Ordinance number 2, 2023, amended to the Terre Haute City Code, modifying certain provisions of the code related to special use criteria and definitions of family and persons requiring additional consideration. The specific language is residential facilities for mentally ill men. The amended portion of the code defines residential facility for persons requiring additional consideration. By defining such a facility requires that it be a special use for
Commissioners, Eddie Felling, City Attorney. Glad to be here this evening. This is going to receive a lot of attention, and it already has over the past several months. If you might recall, we were here probably a year ago with an earlier version of this exact document, and we subsequently withdrew that and made some additional revisions. One of the biggest things we did was we contacted outside third-party counsel from Indianapolis to have a look at it. There are some very interesting, very in-depth, complex legal arguments that go along with making these changes, especially since it deals with protected classes of individuals, specifically those that have disabilities. It's long. There's a lot in this document. I don't necessarily think it's the best for me to go through this step by step, but I am here to answer specific questions, if any. I know there's a lot of members from the community that are here that would like, most likely to speak this evening. But I would ask that, I would hope anyway, that at the end of our discussion this evening, this board does take some type of action to get this through to the next level. One of the most frustrating things that can happen for us at the city level is when things stop here and individuals that are interested in partaking in the discussion and conversation end up having to go to 5 or 6 different meetings at different levels of government. And ultimately, this will end up one way or the other before the council, and obviously we do very much respect what comes out of this board, and there is some very good discussion that helps get sifted out along the way before it reaches the council. But I would ask that because of the number of people that are going to be involved in providing input on this and wanting to be involved in the public discussion, that some action is taken here this evening. So with that, again, and very briefly what this does, it provides an avenue that previously, as Mr. Baylor pointed out, went through a plan development rezoning. It now sets a list of specific criteria that would permit these types of facilities to be opened in residential areas. So instead of just a normal, hey, I'm so-and-so here asking for a rezoning to a plan development, there's no criteria really when you decide those items. Now we have a specific list that's going to go before the BZA for their consideration as to whether or not they would permit this use. Not only do we have the criteria of how these individuals are living and going through the rehabilitation process together, but we also have hard criteria as well with regard to square footage and the number of people that can be in a traditional single-family home. So we've done our best to formulate this. I can tell you that it's gone through at least 24 revisions over the last year and a half to come up with what we have here today. Nothing is ever perfect in these types of scenarios, but we have been given, I don't necessarily want to say approval, but we've been given an informal blessing from our outside counsel that this passes the smell test as far as something we can do to take a proactive step to regulate how, when, and where these facilities go into single-family zoned areas within the city. So with that, again, I'm here to answer any questions you have, but I do know that there are several individuals here that would like to speak.
Does anyone have any initial questions, Mr. Felling? We'll count on you coming back and answer them. If you don't, go ahead.
Eddie, just to be clear, the outside legal opinion you received was after this had been amended.
The version you have in front of you
Right.
has been looked at by outside counsel.
Okay.
We'll give people an opportunity to speak, and we'll ask you to.
I'll be here all night.
You're not
so
leaving,
if you need anything from me, don't hesitate to ask.
Okay. Would anyone like to speak to this issue?
Who's going to go first is the question.
Good evening, planning commissioners. I would say it's wonderful to see you, but I just got back from the eye doctor, and you're all pretty blurry.
You can't see us.
But I'm Neil Garrison with the City Council, the 5th District. We've been working on this, and Eddie Felling's done a good job for, 18 months or so with multiple revisions. We've got some neighborhood folks here. I don't know if they want to speak necessarily, but I think we're really excited to get this forward and over to the council so we can allow more public input and conversations. They've been very patient and we're just anxious to get this moving along. So anything you can do to get it to the council, so we can be as transparent as possible, make sure everybody's happy with the results, and we can get this approved. If you have any questions for me, I'll be here as long as Eddie is.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Neil right now? Okay, thanks, Neil.
Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else like to speak? Sure.
Commissioners, I'm Anna Lee Chalos McAleese, and I've lived in the College Park area for 40 years with my husband Andrew. And it's been a fantastic place to live until about 18 months ago. And an out-of-state business bought a home in our neighborhood and has turned it into a rehab house that does not have a counselor or any type of monitor there. It's a self-governing group of people that live there. And I'll admit there are some times it seems quiet. But then there are times, and there have been many times, that there are residents that live there that are in some form of rehab that have left drug paraphernalia in the alley. Police have been called. There have been people having episodes of maybe a combination of mental illness, drugs, and alcohol. I don't know those specifics, but the police were called and they were taken away. I live 2 blocks from College Park, and I don't want my grandchildren walking past this house to the park anymore. And it breaks my heart. And I could go on, but I won't. I've said enough, I think. We hope that you'll change the coding so that we can have rehab facilities in our community that have qualified counselors there to help these people get back on their feet. People that are trying to rehab can't just be left on their own. We have had mental illness in my family with relatives, and we could not leave my sister alone. She needed to have a counselor with her if she was in a facility. And so the idea that people that can just self-heal in a facility that's run by Oxford House is very distressful to me. And I hope you see it that way.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Jimmy Jeffers. I'm a 36-year neighbor of the College Park neighborhood. What I basically have is a question I'll address to Mr. Felling. He came to an early meeting in the park, in a shelter at the park, when the neighbors first found out about this, and we were ready to circle the wagons. And one of the things that was said almost immediately, I believe, at that meeting, and several times later from different people that were looking at this, was that it's too late to do anything about this one. We've lost this battle. We need to try to set the stage for what we can do in the future. But in something that you said when you were explaining this, it sounds like that there was initially a responsibility for these people to ask for some kind of variance to do what they're doing in this neighborhood. And conversations that different people had with it, I believe their opinion was that they didn't have to do that. And so I guess my question is, what happens now? If this ordinance is passed, do these people have to now come back and say, okay, we want to apply for this variance or rezoning or whatever it's going to be in accordance with the changes made in the zoning ordinance? So that's my question right now.
And I can
Go
answer
ahead.
that one easy.
Absolutely, yeah.
There is no retroactive application to the effect that this ordinance would have if it's passed, meaning this would be from the date of passage and signing off by the mayor forward. It's not backward looking.
I would have a similar question, because I applaud you for your work, and I think you're headed in the right direction, and I think it sounds like to me everybody in this room is looking for the same thing, but we're probably not satisfying the problem that we already have. And in just what I've read in reporting and in meeting, with you, I'm confused about this as well. I understand R1 zoning classification, and I understand that 8 unrelated people paying rent to live in a house doesn't meet any of those requirements. So as the city attorney, or maybe staff can help me with this, why have we not, are we so afraid of a lawsuit that we're not doing the right thing, I guess is my question.
Good question. It's a great question. What's the nicest way I can say thanks a lot to our friends in Washington for coming up with really fun rules and regulations and laws that put us on the local level in a situation like this? And I will tell you 3 words: federal fair housing, and that act from the federal government, and how we handle and define families, and how we have traditionally interpreted it and enforced it on our level do not jive with one another. And yes, I will be the first to, I'll be the first to tell you,
Right.
I am scared. My job as the city attorney is to protect us from potential liability. And do I like at all the fact that every other facility that I'm aware of has played by the internal rules that we've made, which is go through, get your plan development, have a public hearing on it, and the city council will decide, based upon your all's recommendation, whether or not you're allowed to perform the way that you're asking to. And then someone goes off and says, we're not going to do that. It's aggravating.
Right.
It's 18 months of going through and finding a way where we can put together some type of oversight that's not going to put us in a position to be sued on a federal level. And here we are. So yes, there are a lot of people, and I'm not identifying anybody individual, that will look at our current rules and say, hey, why haven't you done something? Right. Hey, you're purposely not doing your job. I'm sorry, but those people haven't done their research.
Right.
And
well, I think my answer to that is you're doing one of your jobs.
I'm trying my best. And I feel
And
guilty.
certainly, as the city attorney, protecting the city's interest is paramount to you. I would have a different take on that. I would, as a private citizen of Terre Haute, I would be less concerned about litigation and more concerned about protecting the citizens of the city of Terre Haute. But I understand your position.
Understood.
Yeah. I mean, as you can tell, I believe that people have been way too patient, and we ought to take action, and that action ought to forward this to the city council if they for some reason want to stall it. But I don't, as a plan commission, I certainly don't think we should be stalling it anymore.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I'm Kevin Southwood, and, this problem, homes and stuff and properties, it's not in College Park, it's in the whole country. So I'd like to see if you could put like a city map of like Terre Haute, like a 2x3 map. You go to each block. The city picks a house that's in decent shape, the yard's clean, well kept, and they put a city flag on the front of the house. Well, what that is, that's a positive for the neighborhood. Hopefully, others could maybe pay a small amount of money and buy a flag so they could put on their house to instill that there's positive things around here, and for others to, every time you're seeing something, it plays into your mind. You see something, oh, that's over here, or that's over here, or a stoplight, you stop at a stoplight. Well, a flag on people's properties would signify what the city considers a home in decent standing. It doesn't have to be the best or the biggest or the most expensive. It just has to be a home in decent standing. It's a parameter for others to visualize that, I want my house like that too, or either I don't. But, there should be some type of something that would help generate people to be involved more in a community spirit, especially with their own homes, you know, and, you know, how many, I mean, I haven't even heard of how many people in the city have hard times even putting new windows or doors in their house, so if they don't pay outrageous price gouged energy bills because they don't have the money to get some new windows or doors in their house, so they can't pay their property taxes, you know, and they can't pay their utility bills. So, you know, the houses go off to sale and nothing ever changes. You know, I think that, you know, you have to try to do something, and you have to set some guidelines that people can see. What you say, I live over on 7th Avenue, what you say doesn't mean nothing, because I don't see nothing. You know, I'm just trying to, you know, keep my home, you know, in decent shape, you know, and others aren't. And, you know, I just think that we really need to see everybody driving down every block, you would see a city flag of Terre Haute. Kids, what's that for? Because they have a house that's in good standing with the city. That's considered, even if you don't like your neighbor or they don't like you, that still is considered a positive for the city. It's considered a positive right in the neighborhood. So the more flags that you would hopefully see, it would hopefully generate a more positive feeling from all the neighbors, because hopefully in 2 or 3 years, you might see more and more flags up and down. I want to have my house graded to see if I could have a good standing. You know, I don't even know where I sit, you know, where I stand. You know, we need some kind of like guidelines, and, you know, you have to try something different. Every year I've read the paper, and it's two times they got great big piles of all these homes that are condemned. You know, if you would have caught them early on, maybe you could have saved some of these homes. You know, help put people, you know, like they see this, they see like a good flag or flag and stuff. It helps to put the positive into their mind that this is what you have to have in order to have a good home. Everybody can see a poor home, you know, but, you know, and everybody cuts their grass, it looks good. Everybody washes their car, it looks good. You know, those are positive features, and we need to make sure that we're always trying to get a positive result. You know, we pay taxes, that's a positive parameter of getting something good for the community. When homes don't maintain their property, that's a negative. And whenever homeowners can't get no help from the city, you're really accomplices to having, you're a generator of negatives in the community that you demand taxes be paid to, so we could have negatives placed upon us without no control to stop it.
Thank you for your comments. I think we certainly appreciate your comments about pride in our community. I think that's part of what we're talking about here.
Well, I just think that, you know, we have to try to do something. You know,
We agree.
You can't have all these homes torn down when, you know.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone on the planning commission have any comments?
What's our choices? Recommended, send it with no recommendation?
You can have a favorable, you can have unfavorable, you can have no recommendation, or you can move the table. Yes.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to stall it here.
No,
There's no
sorry.
conversation that's gonna happen here tonight that's gonna move us forward in making a decision. We all wanna get this right. We can't get this wrong, right, for a multitude of reasons. So my recommendation would be that we move this forward with no recommendation. And one of the reasons for that is we don't want what the area planning commission recommends to become an arguing point as we move this forward into the next conversation. That's just my, we're gonna continue this conversation, you know.
Have a motion. Is there a second? Got a motion and a second. All those in favor? All right. Any opposed? I'm opposed. Okay. So the motion does not pass. How many no's were there?
I don't know how many, you know,
So there's only two, so it does pass. Was there only two no's?
I cannot speak of.
Two no's.
Two no's.
Me and John. So there's seven. 7-4, but it does not pass. Right. So we have to have another motion.
I'll make a motion to send no recommendation.
That's what she just,
Oh, I thought-
that's what just
Oh, I
stated.
thought you made it unfavorable.
No,
I
Oh.
said
no,
send
just no.
forward, no
Just no.
recommendation.
I'll retract that.
That's already been defeated. You moved. So now we have a motion for favorable. Seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Made it.
One. Motion passes. Favorable recommendation.
Thank you all. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Baylor and his staff. I know it's
Appreciate it.
taxing.
Yeah. One more motion.
So moved for,
Any opposed to that?
no. These two wouldn't vote against that. They might send a no recommendation.
Well,
That was inevitable.